Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the HCD VidCast on Curious Conversations in Market Research. Today, our topic is systems. You'll hear what that means just shortly, but welcome back to everybody who's been traveling along with us on this journey, and welcome to all the new people that are joining us for the first time. Glad to have you. You are listening to Michelle Niedziela, that's me, VP of Research and Innovation at HCD Research, and I have a PhD in Behavioral Neuroscience. And I'm joined, as always, by the wonderful Kathryn Ambroze.
Aw, what a sweet introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Kathryn Ambroze, and I'm the Manager of Behavioral and Marketing Sciences with our Research and Innovation team at HCD. And I'm very excited to chat about this topic of system thinking. But before we get into it, I'll let Michelle share a little bit about our company.
Yeah. So who are we? Why are we doing this? What is this? We are HCD Research. It's a market research and consumer research house, meaning we supply market research and consumer research capabilities to help end clients measure how consumers are experiencing products, communications, other types of stimuli. We do this using neuroscience, psychology, and traditional market research. Anything from product development all the way through marketing and communications. We do this in the early stages of exploration all the way through the final stages of validation. And we do this worldwide. So it can be done online anywhere in the world. It can be done in person anywhere in the world. The term we use to describe what we do is applied consumer neuroscience, as it is a combination of the neuroscience and psychological tools alongside the traditional consumer and market research tools and how they work together. So what we do is we have a conversation, Kathryn and I, about various topics. And today's topics is about systematic thinking. So what is system thinking? Basically, this was brought up by Daniel Kahneman in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, for which he got a Nobel Prize, not for the book, but for his work in behavioral economics to explain these types of ideas of decision-making, right, Kathryn?
Right, exactly. So basically, the ideas of system thinking is really just to classify different ways that information is processed in the brain. And Daniel Kahneman actually is a psychologist and an economist that focuses on these ideas of decision-making and behavioral economics and judgment. So within his book, he tries to use these this systems 1 and 2 to really explain these a little bit more challenging concepts to understand without it being tangible. So
like how consumers make their decisions, like why do we do certain things? Why do I buy this thing and not that thing? And this whole idea has become really popular in marketing and consumer work, specifically in the neuromarketing or applied neuroscience, consumer neuroscience groups. They kind of view Kahneman as dogma at this point, right? But it's unfortunate because so many people, talk about system 1, right, which is this non-conscious bit that we'll describe a little better just momentarily. But I just kind of want to discuss this a little bit, that a lot of the companies that are out there that talk about system 1 being so important, the non-conscious being so important, that you need to ignore system 2, which is what people say, and their cognitive thought. Those people typically haven't read the book, right? Because the book is all about how you have system 1 and system 2, but they actually work together, right? And they kind of like push-pull on one another on how you make your decisions.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really great point to bring up front, because system 1 and system 2, they really are they're characters to help guide people to understand really complicated ideas within psychology and neuroscience. So when people take it so rigidly, it can be misleading.
Absolutely, because if you think about how it's kind of divided, right? So when Kahneman was talking about system 1 and system 2, system 1, as I was saying, is that non-conscious or unconscious thought. If you've heard of Freud, you've heard it as the id, or sorry, it's the id, right? Yeah, so it's the id. And so it's like the gut reactions that you have, right? And system 2 is like you're really thoughtful, conscious, ego that's kind of like monitoring your id, right?
Right.
So, those are the two systems, but I think a lot of times people try to think of it as being totally separate. And they're not, right? It's a continuum. Some things are a
Exactly.
little more system one, some things are a little more system two. And if you think about how it works in real life, if you're going to take it totally separate, if you were making a decision on car buying, right?
Mhm.
Your system one might say, ooh, shiny red convertible car, sports car, I want that, right? Because it's really cool and it's appealing to your emotions, right? But system one's really error prone because system two is going to step in and say, wait, I have a 50-mile commute every day and I have a limited budget. Maybe I need to get that used Honda Civic, right? Gets better gas mileage. It's in my price range. Maybe I don't need the bright red shiny car. I'll go with the silver used Honda Civic. So I think while it's attractive to say that system one is driving people's behaviors, ultimately system two can bring sense into the situation, right?
Absolutely. And I really think it's important to hone in on the idea that the brain is really complex and really integrated within the various components that it has. So it is really, I think you said it perfectly when you called it a continuum, that it's not just on off. There's not a switch that happens that's like, oh, I'm going to
Right.
make a great decision. Like I'm going to make something, I'm going to think about this a little bit longer. That must be a different side of my brain. Like, no, it's very much intertwined. So,
Yeah. And when you think about how people shop, you can take ideas from both to really appeal to the consumer, right? So you could take the idea of that, okay, there's something cool. Where's the cool factor in that convertible that's attracting people's attention? And how can we bring that in to the communications of the more practical car so that they feel they're getting that emotional satisfaction, that reward, of having something cool.
right. And I
Yeah.
would also like to compliment what you're saying is that something that initially is something that's system two, quote unquote, thinking could eventually turn into system one thinking. If we stick
Hmm.
with cars and just the idea of habits, if you're first learning how to drive, it's a little overwhelming because you're hyper aware of everything and you're learning your surroundings of the car. But eventually, over time, you become very used to it, and then it can eventually become this system one thinking where
Hmm.
it's a simple task and it becomes almost mindless, where people are,
Yeah.
you know,
That's a good point. It can go both ways, right? So I think if you think about your grocery shopping, or your more general shelf type of shopping, you could have a list, right? And you're going to stick to your list, and that's very system two,
mhm.
very thoughtful, very effortful, very conscious, and it stays within your budget. It's a slow process that you've come up with. However, you might be attracted to something that you see on the end cap. You were looking for bread, but on the end cap is some sort of new bread item, right? So even though your list said, bread, maybe you'll be able to see something that'll attract your system one thinking within that aisle, or the other way around, right? So you could be attracted to some product in a very system one way that ends up feeding into your system two, and it becomes part of your list, right?
Absolutely. Yep. That's kind of how a lot of people's habits are disrupted is by, that happens to me all the time is I'll go to the store and then something will be on sale that I wasn't expecting. And I'm like, oh, that's a great deal. I might as well, just like derange a little bit from the list that I have and take advantage of it.
That's
So
kind of the economics part of the behavioral economics, right? That there are these trade-offs that we make and these push and pulls that we have in our decision making.
absolutely. And Kahneman does discuss that idea of heuristics because it's very much a part of what the book shares. So if you are interested in the book, I think that would be a
Yeah,
huge
if you're
idea.
interested in systematic thinking, I think it's very important that you actually read the book, and not just, listen to a salesperson tell you something about it, right?
Say it again for the people in the back.
Just to beat that in. But what's really funny, we've been talking about system one and system two, and that's really what's discussed in Thinking Fast and Slow, and predominantly in behavioral economics is system one and system two. But there's this other idea of a system three, and it's kind of a newer yet old idea, right? So it's kind of like everything old is new again. It's a way to dress up something that perhaps we were already doing in our traditional research, right?
Yeah, it's very much a rebrand of something that we've incorporated into market research for quite some time. But it's this idea of forward thinking, forward processing that's not necessarily explicitly represented by System 1 and System 2. And that's kind of why the conversations began about maybe we should discuss creating a third system. And it's really explaining that future facing methodology.
So system one is very like, it's the quick response. It's your non-conscious. System two is your very conscious, sort of smart way of thinking through something.
Right.
And system three is very much like what would happen, right?
Exactly. So it's this perspective thinking where you're imagining and you're predicting and
you're projecting yourself into something else. So either you're projecting into the future, like what would I do 10 years from now? Or you're projecting yourself into a situation, right? So like, what would I do if I was in this situation?
Exactly. A lot of System 3 kind of falls under the idea of being able to anticipate upcoming needs. And humans are great at that. That's a really big part of why we're constantly reviewing information and as a new information comes in to reform our decisions, because we are trying to reformulate what to prioritize constantly. Mm-hmm. So by promoting this idea of being explorative and imaginative, theoretically, it allows System 3 to share what consumers find very ideal.
So like if we were going to look at this for car buying, I guess system one would be very much like, oh, shiny sports car, right?
Yeah.
And system two is very much like, I need a reliable car with good gas mileage that's in my budget. Mm-hmm. And system three might be, if I was going to rent a car in Hawaii, what might I choose?
Yeah, exactly. Or, I mean, you could also take it, am I looking to make this purchase last for 10 years? Like, what will my life look like in 5 years from now? Will this car still be useful to me?
Or the person who you are. Yeah. So like if you're retired, what car would you have? You no longer need the minivan, right? Because your kids are grown. Now what car are you interested in?
Exactly.
So you could have three very different cars here. System one might get you the red shiny sports car. System two might get you the used Honda Civic, and system three might get you the convertible for driving around Hawaii.
Right. And the honest truth is, what car do you go with? It's the answer to everything. It depends.
Yeah, it could be price, it could be special, it could be time of year, it could be who's going with you on that trip to Hawaii. Yeah. Right. Yeah, absolutely. So what else is going on here with system three?
Right. So to dive into this a little bit further, we really did cover the idea of what system three is. It's just incorporating imagination into possible what if, like what would happen if I took a trip to Hawaii was a really great example. And I think it's also important to consider ways that system three research is useful for a business or useful for a company.
Yeah, one of the questions I really like here to add to surveys, especially if you're doing like a food research survey where you have people tasting different prototypes of food, it really is that question is, would you eat more? Mm-hmm. I think it's a question people don't utilize enough. So they ask them like, how sweet is it? Is it too sweet? Is it, do you like it on a scale from 1 to 7 or 0 to 7? All those sort of questions that we do around the traditional consumer research. But often at the end of it, if you just say, would you like more of this?
It seems simple enough, but a lot of times it does go over.
Another thing that people have done to sort of get at it without even asking is kind of saying how much, like if you did an in-home research, how much of the actual product did people bring back, right? Say if it was a lotion, they probably going to use more of the one they like more. But also, are they going to ask to keep it, right? The extra amount,
right?
Those sort of things.
So what you're suggesting here is that this could be really applicable if you're launching a product or if you're launching a campaign or maybe trying a new ingredient in some type of a mixture for so that could
seems pretty simple. If people don't actually want more of it, then maybe they wouldn't buy more of it, right?
Right, of course. If you're not using up the first package that you bought, why would you get a second?
Right. But I think it also works for other situations too. So like, I think when you're thinking about things like, you have here treating the common cold.
Yeah.
How would you go about this situation, or maybe like, how would you deal with certain financial situations?
Yeah,
right?
and it can help you pivot if you need to really align with what that consumer is looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Because if there's some type of a group that you're working with where maybe a lot of for example, mothers might consider themselves, they don't really view themselves as needing sleep aid or sleep medicine or anything like that because they identify with the idea of exhaustion just going along with motherhood. So by learning about the maybe possible characteristics that people identify with,
Mm-hmm.
it'll help you to shift your messaging and to shift the way that you
Or
expose
come up with innovations, right? Because if we ask this question, how would you treat symptoms for the cold? I think if you were to go into, let's go with the mom people. If you were to go in a mom group, I mean, they all are really hot on elderberry syrup right now, right?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that if you were to ask any of these people, yeah, that's what they're going to say they're going to use because it comes off as being very natural and et cetera and so on. And so what do you see coming out in the market right now is a lot of people adding the flavor of elderberry to traditional common cold treatments.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And so like, that's like something that can give you maybe an innovation that you can add that's going to appeal to those people, right?
Yeah,
so if you understand how they would approach it, then you can incorporate that into your new product.
Yeah, so it really comes down to maybe creating a new approach or understanding the priorities of your client. System 3 could also be really useful if you're trying to plan an event or if you're developing say you just started a company and you're trying to develop a mission statement about what you want your company to emulate. So these are all places where System 3 could be very useful. And like we had mentioned, it's pretty simple to incorporate it.
Could be a simple question, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So pretty easy. So how do we bring all this in together? Again, this is about decision making. Like systematic thinking is really thinking about having like figuring out how people think about things. Like when you're presented with a situation, again, that system 1 is your automatic. It's your gut response. System 2 is your hardcore thought pattern. Like making conscious decisions. And system 3 is like it's your imaginative situation, right? It's putting yourself out there in a different situation than you are currently.
Right. And the thing is that all of these systems do feed into each other. So by using system thinking within the context of market research, it helps to make it stronger. And like we always say, research, depending on the type of research that you're doing, it often can be really well complemented with the other appropriate metrics that can really enhance your research.
You really do have to think of it all together because again, if we think about those cars, if you're following system 1, you might not get that system 2 response, right? So you'd be designing all sports cars. And, the example I like to give when I talk about that is that if you look out on the streets, what do you see more of? Convertible red, Corvettes, or do you see more silver Honda Civics?
Right. I would complement that with the idea of, well, where are you? What kind of communities are you in? Because I can assure you that maybe a retirement community has a lot more of those flashes than if you're on a college campus.
Absolutely. So I think that's, again, something to beat that dead horse in, that it's not just one of these systems to focus on. They should never be a replacement for the other. You can't replace system 1 for system 2. You can't use system 3 in replace of any of the others. You really have to think about them all together and try to put them in all of your research, right?
Exactly. And we do want to mention that there are white papers available about the idea of systems thinking. So if you are interested, feel free to contact us and we will be more than happy to share that information. It's really a tool to help educate people about the different
learn more, see the actual citations, read the actual text. Join us. First of all, please like this video on YouTube and please subscribe to us on YouTube. Feel free to reach out and see what we're doing on LinkedIn. Tweet with us, where Kathryn puts out a lot of science stuff, and the rest of the team also puts out different events and information around consumer neuroscience. Visit our blog for more information, or if you'd like to see some previous webinar work that we've done and other writings that we have. And like Kathryn was saying, email us anytime, but most importantly, please join us again for next time when we talk about our next fun, curious topic to cover.
Yep, exactly. So feel free, like Michelle mentioned, hit the thumbs up, send us a comment, anything like that. And also, please, if you are enjoying these, turn on your notifications and let us, so that way you'll be notified whenever we do put these podcasts out. They have been weekly, so we're hoping to keep up with that. And until next time.
Yeah, until next time, it's been great. This is HCD Research. Talk to you soon.